Are marquee openers at LSU a thing of the past? Brian Kelly answered that question, and we're reacting to it. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. We are glad to have you aboard with us here. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. We are free available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So a little bit of an odd week with LSU playing on Sunday, flying home Monday. Then they were back at it Tuesday after the holiday. So Brian Kelly normally has his press conference on Monday. It was Tuesday. So today's episode, I'll ask you to bear with me, is going to be a good bit of Brian Kelly talking and then me reacting to what Brian Kelly said. And in large part, that's because Brian Kelly was asked a lot of the questions that you have asked since LSU lost to USC. We're going to delve into how Harold Perkins fared in this new defense. We are going to delve into whether or not LSU got too conservative offensively. Brian Kelly had a back and forth with Koki Riley of The Advocate about Garrett Nussmeier and Brian Kelly's post-game comments about Nussmeier. Injury issues. We're going to get into all that. My question about the decision to receive the kicker. Now, Shea Dixon asked it in the press conference, but it's the question that I asked here. So we're going to get into all that. But let me start with the thing that I think everyone maybe most pressantly wants to know, which is it time to get rid of these tough openers? And you know my contention on this, which is yes, if there's a way to get out of playing Clemson the next 2 years, do it. And it's not because you want to dodge good teams. Ultimately, I want to see 12 games scheduled filled with nothing but Power 4 opponents, games that people actually want to see. But until the College Football Playoff Selection Committee will reward you for playing that game, even if you lose it, then there's no sense in playing it if there's not uniform scheduling across college football. But Brian Kelly was asked, should you get rid of these tough openers? And he didn't necessarily agree.
Look, we're going to be a better football team. I wanted to win the game. Our whole state wants to win the game. Everybody that follows LSU wants to win the football game. But we're going to be a better football team because of what happened. It would have been better if we won the game. Our margin now is a razor-thin margin when you lose a football game like this. But, you know, we're developing a football team, and this was important. I understand that. But we're going to be better as a football team going into week 2. We know a lot more about our football team. We know about what we need to do better as coaches, and as a development of a football team. I don't necessarily think the opener winning it 73-0 gives you much benefit. You go into week 2 with a lot of questions about who you are. I got a good feeling about this football team. This is going to be a good football team. We got some work to do, but we're going to get this team to the point where we're balanced in all 3 phases. We're going to complement. We did not complement very well, but when we complement each other offensively and defensively, it's going to be a good football team.
By the way, I think Brian Kelly took a little shot at Lane Kiffin there. 73-0 was the final score of the Ole Miss Furman game. And if you missed it, Lane Kiffin took a shot at Brian Kelly on Twitter about the Coke Smart Water thing from a week ago. So I think those two just keep throwing shade at each other back and forth. But the thing that Brian Kelly said there that I do agree with is you don't learn anything about your team when you win a game 73-0. You don't. Your starters score because they're outmanning somebody, and then your backups are in, and what have you really learned? Nothing. But eventually you're going to be challenged, to be certain. But Ole Miss went up in the polls after beating Furman 73-0. LSU played a decidedly tougher opponent, lost a very close game, and dropped in the polls. It is just the nature of how college football is viewed. Not all wins are equal, but all losses are devastating. And until that changes, there's no sense in playing those games. Yes, I fully endorse LSU finding a week 0 opponent next year, or if they can, and I don't think they can, get out of the game against Clemson. Because remember, the SEC still mandates a Power 4 non-conference opponent. So if you got out of the Clemson game, you'd still have to play another one. So your best path, I think, is to find a week 0 opponent. Brian Kelly even said it. Your biggest improvement is from week 1 to week 2. So yeah, I'd rather play USC or Clemson or anybody in week 2 instead of week 1. One of the big things that I had an issue, of course, with was LSU's decision to receive the opening kickoff after winning the toss. Brian Kelly explained his decision, and he contradicts himself here. I'll see if you see it, see if you hear it, but I'll come back on the other side and explain.
Part of it, obviously, is the analytics play a role in it. So going forward on 4th and 3, the analytics gave us a high percentage there of scoring a touchdown. So that was one of the reasons there for going for it. In terms of receiving the kickoff, that is a personal preference of scoring first. The team that scores first has a higher percentage of winning games. So I've always carried that philosophy with me throughout my career of wanting to go on offense first. Now, I know a lot of people want to defer, get the ball in the third quarter, and I totally understand that, and there's certain situations that I would do that in wanting to put our defense on the field first. But I felt like our offense was the group that I wanted to see first, and so that's why we made that decision. Had nothing to do with the analytics in that situation.
Did you catch it? Brian Kelly said that the analytics show that the team that scores first wins more often than not. Well, you are at the 3-yard line, brother. You are at the 3-yard line with a chip shot field goal opportunity, and you passed on it. You passed on the opportunity to score first because you got greedy and you took a decidedly lower percentage play going for it on 4th and goal from the 3, not 4th and goal from the 1, 4th and goal from the 3, and passing on what amounted to a 3-point PAT. You had the opportunity to score first. He contradicted himself in that moment. I hated the decision at the time. I hate the decision today. And the next time LSU wins a toss and elects to receive, I'm going to hate the decision then regardless of the outcome. One more newsy item here. Brian Kelly did give an injury report after the game.
Well, the only disappointing news is Princeton Malbrew looks to have a serious knee injury. We're going to do a little bit more imaging on that today. But the initial imaging was not good. And so I think we'll have further. Owen would get to me here when I'm done with this press conference, but it was not good for a knee injury that happened on the kickoff that was returned after the penalty, which we've sent in to take a look at because it was what we thought was an egregious block in the back. But that would be one injury. Kyle Parker, as you know, did not play very much. I think he had a UCL, which is, I guess, the ulnar nerve. Looks to have been an injury that he's going to come back from, but we just don't know how quickly. So we would consider him right now doubtful for this weekend, but we'll see how that goes. Those were the most significant injuries. I think everything else is, probable in terms of we've got some bumps and bruises that will show up on the injury report tomorrow, but nothing that would exclude them for the game.
So by and large, LSU comes out of the game with USC very healthy. Disappointing about Princeton Malbrew. The real notable thing there is Brian Kelly said that they sent in the film of that kick return. You remember, of course, that was after the Kyron Lacey touchdown, whenever Lacey drew the personal foul, the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. So LSU kicked off from the 20, and that's when Zachariah Branch had the long return that was almost house. I mean, Aaron Burrell, the kicker, made the tackle on the kickoff, and but for that, he would have scored. But Kelly said he thought there was an egregious block in the back, so they sent in that film, maybe one that the refs missed on a. It's hard not to overanalyze every component of the game, every moment that could have made a difference in a game that was tied with 8 seconds to go. And ultimately, that game-winning touchdown happened at that point. We have a lot more I want to get into. Back and forth that Brian Kelly had with Cokie Riley, the advocate, about Garrett Nussmeier. And by the way, Brian Kelly was in the wrong here. Well, let me rephrase that. He said something incorrect, but I understand his point of view, and we'll delve into that. So don't you move. Got a ton still to get to. And, of course, talking a little bit about Harold Perkins and how his debut went with Blake Baker's defense. That's all ahead. Stay here. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. Love getting to tell you about eBay Motors, great partner of ours here on Locked on LSU, because eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. It's eBay Motors. I want to get into the conversation, the back and forth of Brian Kelly and Cokie Riley about Garrett Nussmeier. Very quickly, though, there was another part of the injury piece that Brian Kelly was asked about the receivers, and he starts by talking about Xavier Thomas, then mentioned how important it is for them to get another wide receiver up to speed. And then the back end of this cut is an update on Chris Hilton. But listen to how Brian Kelly starts this.
Yeah, and I was proud of Zion. I thought he obviously gives us a new dimension in kickoff return. He's, picking his foot up a little bit more on the kickoff return, or we probably open the game with a kickoff return for a touchdown. He's dangerous on punt return, which gets everybody's attention in the film room when we're watching, punt return. Our gunners got to do a great job, and Vicer's got to do a great job. Anyway, I thought he did a good job as a receiver, made a big catch for us late in the game, ran great routes, but we've got to get another guy ready. And the guy that we've got to get ready is Shelton Sampson. I mean, he's got to be able to play for us, and we got to get him on the field. And so this is a big week for him, and the next week's coming up. He's got to get in our rotation. If we can get him in our rotation, it allows us to slide some people around. So he becomes kind of a focal point for us moving forward. And, these comments obviously are going to be viral, right? I mean, Coach, but the reality of it is he's important to us, and we got to get him going. Yeah, I mean, he's ground-based running, but receiver's different. Like if he was an old lineman, he's playing, I mean, if he's at a different position, he's probably playing. But this is getting, a kid that is an elite player and elite speed guy, getting him right where he feels really comfortable that he can get in and out of breaks. So we'll kind of see how he goes through the week. I want to make sure he's 100% before we put him back out there. So we'll kind of see, how he goes, and we'll probably have a better report on him as we get through the week.
So a few things there. Number one, Brian Kelly mentioned Xavier Thomas in the opening kickoff return of the game. I was in the stadium. I was sitting right about the 30-yard line. He was tackled right in front of where I was sitting. I'm curious how it looked on television, but Xavier Thomas looked like he was about to break, and clearly Brian Kelly alluded to there that he was close to breaking it. There was a massive hole. If he hadn't gotten tripped, he was in a foot race to the end zone. But Xavier Thomas, the return game, a very bright spot. After 2 years of not having a return game, you have a guy that's legitimately good there. It was interesting hearing Brian Kelly talk about Shelton Sampson as someone they have to get up to speed. If you've been following us, I could look back into my notes. The very first day of fall camp, the very first drill team period we got to see, was a 7-on-7 period where on back-to-back plays, Garrett Nussmeier threw a deep ball down the right sideline to Shelton Sampson, who made contested catches. One of them, he came down, bumped his noggin, and had to miss the rest of practice. But from literally the first day, Shelton Sampson was taking reps with the ones. Whatever it is that has slowed his progress or allowed Kyle Parker to pass him, I just look at this week as a massive opportunity because let's be very clear. Nicholls is a good FCS football team. They won their conference a year ago. But you are going to pulverize this football team. And it's going to give a great opportunity for other guys, younger guys, to get on the field and make plays. This is a great opportunity for Shelton Sampson to go run around and impact the offense and show what he can do. Shelton's wearing number 6. He's a former 5-star. We've all been waiting for his opportunity. You hate that it comes due to injury to Chris Hilton and Kyle Parker. But this is the opportunity for Chris Hilton. And I think he's got a great opportunity to have a big game on Saturday. And then specifically about Hilton, as Brian Kelly said, he's doing ground-based running, but they're going to make sure he's 100%. Listen, if he wasn't going to play against USC, there's no sense at all in playing him in this game. This was a part of our conversation last week. You hold him to South Carolina. If he wasn't going to go against USC, you don't risk anything at all putting him out there against Nicholls. You give him the full extra week of recovery, of treatment, of preparation, and then you get him ready to go when you go up to Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks in week 3. And by that point, he would have had a full month, more than a month to heal from that injury and should be good to go. So I don't expect you'll see Chris Hilton this weekend, and that's okay. It's going to give a guy like Shelton Sampson an opportunity. And that's an opportunity he needs. And as you heard Brian Kelly say, they need Shelton Sampson to develop there. One more here in this segment, and I'm going to grant you, this is a little bit of a longer comment here by Brian Kelly, and I'm going to play it all. And it was a back and forth with he and Koki Riley of The Advocate about Garrett Nussmeier. And if you remember, Brian Kelly after the game said point blank, their quarterback outplayed our quarterback. That was his quote. Now, I defended Brian Kelly because I understood what he meant. In the fourth quarter, LSU had 2 drives with the lead and punted twice. On their last 2 drives, USC scored a touchdown to take the lead. After LSU tied it, USC scored another touchdown to win the game. So I get it. I understand what Brian Kelly meant, but he did say their quarterback outplayed our quarterback. He said that. But here was the back and forth with Brian Kelly and Koki Riley.
Hey, Coach. After the game, you said essentially that Miller Moss, I guess, outplayed Garrett Nussmeier.
That's not what I said. I said that Garrett Nussmeier played pretty good, but Moss made some more plays at the end. Yes.
So why do you believe that Moss?
Because he won.
Took an extra step.
They won.
Okay.
The winner of the game versus the guy that didn't win. So my comments were not to disparage Garrett Nussmeier. I just gave you his numbers. He was 30 for 39 for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. My comments after the game were, how do you think Nussmeier played? I said, he played pretty good, but the other kid played pretty good too, and they won the game. So this had nothing to do with Garrett Nussmeier not playing well. I think his numbers spoke for themselves. There's a couple of plays he left out there that he'd like back, and I'm sure there were a couple of plays that Moss left out there that he'd like back. You know, he had, I think, 2 or 3 balls that were batted down that could have very easily been interceptions. I thought the kid played well, but our guy played very well either. So whatever my comments were, they were not intended in any way to disparage a guy that went 30 for 39 for 308 yards.
Forgive me, I'm going to do this from my phone, but this was Brian Kelly's exact comment after the game.
Got some good athletes. I thought the quarterback played well tonight. He outplayed our quarterback.
He outplayed our quarterback. And Brian Kelly said, Miller Moss, outplayed our quarterback. It's literally the word he used. So Koki Riley was right. That is exactly the word that Brian Kelly used. But I also understand what Brian Kelly was saying. It's just a matter of sometimes when you're sitting in a post-game press conference, and I wanted to clarify this because I'm glad Brian Kelly did. I'm glad Koki asked the question. He probably could have asked it in a different way. But it's what it is. Brian Kelly did use the word outplayed, so Koki was right in that respect. But I also agree with Brian Kelly. I don't think he was in any way throwing shade at Garrett Nussmeier. It was literally what he was saying, which was at the end of the game, you had 2 drives with the lead in the fourth quarter and punted twice when you had a chance to put the game away. Their guy made the plays to win it. Garrett Nussmeier was fantastic. He was fantastic. He missed one throw. And it was the second down throw to Aaron Anderson on that final drive where it was a walk-in touchdown, and you maybe win the game at that point. But you didn't, and he didn't. It doesn't mean he played poorly, but Miller Moss made the plays late, so I understand what Brian Kelly was saying. I don't think Brian Kelly – this is basically to address the fans and say Brian Kelly was pinning the loss on the players and was blaming players. I think he was being very honest. Miller Moss did make more plays late. LSU's veterans did make a couple of silly penalties late in that ball game or throughout the game. Yeah, you got to not make those mistakes. And I think that's a big part of that was a big part of the game. It just was. I don't think Brian Kelly was blaming players. I know that was sort of a narrative after, and I'm glad he had the opportunity to address it. He also was asked, Brian Kelly was, about Harold Perkins, and then something else, which was, how do you teach killer instinct? That's what Brian Kelly said, what I just alluded to. When you had 2 possessions in the fourth quarter, you're up with 8 minutes to play, you're winning the game with 8 minutes to play, and you lose. How do you get the killer instinct, the phrase Brian Kelly used, killer instinct, to finish that game? How do you teach that? It's a question Ron Higgins asked Brian Kelly. His answer was 2 minutes and 8 seconds long. I'm going to play it for you when we come back. Don't move. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Glad to have you aboard with us here, and glad to talk to you about FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we got a little something different for you. The NFL season's just about to start, and now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So you got to visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Again, it's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. And if you want to go bet that $5, you could do it right now. You want to bet on LSU and Nichols, if odds are posted, you can. Look, you can even make a futures bet on the Tigers and maybe to win the SEC or to make the college football playoff. The NFL season is starting on Thursday night. The Ravens and the Chiefs. Chiefs currently a 3-point home favorite over Baltimore and reigning MVP Lamar Jackson. So you want to go get in the action, you can. Just download that FanDuel app. Go to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel.com. Brian Kelly talked about Harold Perkins and how he did in his first game there under Blake Baker playing off-ball linebacker. Here's what he said.
I like him where he is, right? I like him inside the core of our defense. I think what Blake talked to him about and what Blake and I talked about is we need to get him to narrow his focus a little bit more. And when I say narrow his focus, he has a tendency that he wants to do a little bit too much. He's so eager to want to make plays because we put him in that playmaker position, so much. When you work in the kind of areas that he works, your focus has to narrow down a lot more. And so continue to work on narrowing his focus, getting his eyes trained in a different way will be the big improvement we see from week 1 and week 2. And I know you've heard this cliche tons of times, but the team's biggest improvements are made from week 1 to week 2. And I'm going to say that you're going to see a huge improvement now that he's played in the box in a game and we can get his focus narrowed and get his eyes to where they need to be. His eyes were like that, and they need to be so much more focused. Once we get that, it's going to be a bit of a different look, and I think that's going to help him immensely.
As Brian Kelly said, biggest improvement week 1 to week 2. Maybe there's some merit in winning 73-0 in week 1. and saving your tougher opponent for week 2. I digress. The point about Harold Perkins, one thing came to mind. Blake Baker, after spring, was asked about moving Harold Perkins to off-ball linebacker. And the comment Blake Baker made at the time was that physically he could do it, and that's where you have to start. Can he physically do it? And Blake Baker, his contention was, yes, Harold Perkins absolutely can be an off-ball linebacker. It's a matter of reps and getting comfortable in that spot. Well, the only way you get reps and the only way you get comfortable is to play that spot more. So Harold Perkins played in that spot against USC. He's going to play in that spot against Nichols and for the rest of this month. And the contention that I will continue to make is for LSU to have a chance to turn this season back into a championship contending season. Again, I'm not predicting it's going to happen. I want to be very clear about this. I'm just saying to have the opportunity to be playing meaningful games in November, you have to win your next 4 games. You have to stay healthy against inferior opponents and get better. Get the reps you need when you're going to win your next 4. Be playing your best when you go into your open date before you host Ole Miss and win that game. If you do that, you're 5-1 through 6. Can you go 5-1 in the second half? If the answer is yes, you're 10-2 with some marquee wins and you're a playoff team. I'm not saying you can. I'm not saying you will. Let me rephrase. I'm not saying you will. I'm saying you can. And Harold Perkins will be a big part of that and the rest of the team improving week 1 to week 2 and throughout the next month of the season. I want to wrap up today with something a bit more existential. Ron Higgins asked Brian Kelly the question about killer instinct. During his post-game rant where he pounded the table, Brian Kelly said his team lacked killer instinct. They have to develop that killer instinct to not be complacent and think the game's over. LSU led the game with 8 minutes to play and lost. They couldn't finish the game. Same thing happened last year against Ole Miss. Unfortunately, you've seen that too much. So Brian Kelly, who was a bit chatty on Tuesday when he met with reporters, gave a 2-minute and 8-second answer. I'm going to play the entire 2 minutes and 8 seconds for you. I understand that that's generally not great in podcast form. If you're watching on YouTube, you want short snippets and then more of me reacting, and I understand that. But I don't want any of this to be lost because Brian Kelly got a bit animated in this answer. And I want you to have context, and I don't want to just cherry pick a little bit of it. I want to play the entire thing for you with context. So the question was, how do you teach killer instinct? Here's what Brian Kelly said.
Look, I think it happens when you put in the work, and it means so much that you just, under no circumstances, can you let somebody take it away from you. And so you just can't let complacency come in at any time. And I'm not saying that we were complacent, but you just have to continue to build a mindset amongst your guys that the focus is on dominating that play. And we're still working on that every single day about dominating the play that's in front of us. And sometimes we get outside of that and we start thinking big picture and the game is over, or if we get one more stop. Forget about one more stop. Think about this play right now. And, you know, we're still building that with our group. And it's kind of like the Kyron Layson penalty. Kyron's working on his emotional control. If you were here, that young man, I love him because he's working on that every day. That wasn't like malice. That wasn't like it. It's just, he is such a high, strong young man that's all he works on. He's in the locker room saying, I need to maintain my emotional control. I need to maintain it. He is working so hard on that. That's why I was so angry. I was angry at the circumstances because he's working on it. Same thing with Major Burns. I mean, he was so apologetic and so sorry that he took his helmet off. These aren't guys that are just like, I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. These guys are working so hard at it. That's why I want so much for them. You know, it just angers me that we're not getting that break where these kids are putting so much into it. I mean, we had the ball on the ground 5 times. I mean, like, really? It just was frustrating to me that these guys are working so hard, and we're going to get there, and we're going to break through, and you guys will see that.
I'm not sure if he exactly answered the question, but what he did was in this press conference indirectly address all the things that fans have been talking about over the last 48 hours. Specifically the players, and the blaming the players. Brian Kelly propped up Major Burns. He propped up Kyron Lacey. He propped up Garrett Nussmeier and was right to do so. Because I don't think there was legit criticism in the postgame. I think he was answering questions and questions that were legitimate. And his comments, I think, were legitimate as well. But all that, you can tell the emotion is that you have a bunch of guys that care deeply. They want to win. They want to do better. And I think they will. And look, the reason is because we have a 2-year sample size under Brian Kelly to suggest they will. This is the 3rd year in a row now that LSU's lost the opener. The last 2, after losing the opener, the Tigers came back to be 9-3 football team, to win some very significant football games, to get to 10 wins in the bowl. And I think this team's going to win some significant games this year as well. Is it going to be enough to get you into the college football playoff? I don't know. Quite honestly, I don't think so at this point. I mean, at the start of the season, I picked LSU 10-2. Picked them 10-2, but I thought that included a win over USC. So now I think they'll end up 9-3. And I don't think that's going to be good enough. But it wasn't like you were outclassed by USC. And you were right there. And you had the ball down 3 inside their red zone with a play design where Nussmeier hits Aaron Anderson. He walks into the end zone. You got the lead. You may win that game. Just didn't happen. So you play that game 10 times. How many times does LSU win it? 6? I don't know. But they're not far away. They're not far away from being a good team, and they'll get better because Brian Kelly's teams at LSU have gotten better each year they've been here. The real key to getting where you want to be as a program is getting the roster to a point where an opener like this doesn't happen. They're not there yet, but they're close. And I was reminded today, and I don't want you to chuckle at this. I just want to give you some context, okay? Kirby Smart won the national championship at Georgia in year 6. One thing Brian Kelly has at LSU, undeniably, is time. Because that 10-year contract, where if LSU were to fire him without cause, has a 90% buyout, said it too many times. For better or worse, Brian Kelly and LSU are financially bound for a decade. He ain't going anywhere. And I think LSU's got a really good coach, a coach that's instilled culture and discipline and a lot of those things into this program. And he's hired good assistants, and they're recruiting like mad, and they're going to build a roster that's a championship roster. I don't know that that necessarily means they're going to win a national championship, but he's going to build a championship roster. He'll keep growing LSU and getting to that point. We'll see what they can do in the remainder of the season. All right, thanks so much for being here. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and be sure to let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.